High risk start sets for week 2. I have got 5 players that are risky plays for you this week. We will talk about their week 1 performances, expectations for week 2, and whether or not you should start them this week. And if you have any start sit questions for guys that are not on this list, of course, just drop them into the comments. Dak Prescott was drafted as a borderline QB1, so a lot of fantasy managers are wondering if they can trust him in week 2 after the dreadful week 1 performance, or if they should turn to higher upside streaming options. Oddly enough, I actually do feel pretty good about Dak this week. His week 1 box score was ugly, 21 completions on 34 attempts for just 188 yards and no touchdowns. If you just looked at the stats, you would want zero part of Dak, but for me, he is actually a top 12 quarterback this week. Despite the terrible statistical day, Prescott actually looked very sharp. It was a tough defensive matchup against Philadelphia with an incredibly unreliable receiving core that was the real big issue here. According to PFF, CeeDee Lamb had a drop rate of 36.4%, and George Pickens appeared rather disengaged per usual. Lamb had the most drops of any receiver in week 1 and multiple drops that were truly egregious and ill-timed. That typical performance for him, that doesn't happen. And you could tell that he truly felt bad after that. Prescott finished as QB 29 on the week, but this is the perfect bounce back spot for him and CeeDee Lamb. I won't lie, I had higher hopes for Kenneth Walker this season. I talked during draft season about how Walker's criticisms are often related to his ineffectiveness for him as a north-south runner, and how the change to Clint Kubiak's system should be far more beneficial for his playstyle. And I was pumped to see it. Week 1 was shockingly bad. Just 10 attempts for 20 yards, 3 receptions for 4 yards. Bad days happen, okay? But when those bad days are accompanied by your backup running back out snapping you and outperforming you, it is legitimately time to panic. Zach Charbonnet had 12 attempts for 47 yards and 1 touchdown against a solid 49ers defense. There's always been debates around Walker and Charbonnet after the Seahawks took Charbonnet in the second round, literally right after drafting Walker the prior year. But Walker has done an excellent job at retaining his job through multiple regimes, and even in times where he would go down with an injury and Charbonnet would perform well in his absence, Walker would always get that job back. But this time it kind of feels different here. Now, I will say Walker missed all of preseason dealing with some vague foot soreness, so it's possible that Walker was being eased back in here or dealing with residual effects from that injury. For that reason, we do have to give it 1 more week here to see how the backfield workload is split before we make any dramatic decisions on how we approach this backfield and flipping it. Walker is still the higher ranked running back for Seattle for me, but because of the risks, he's been pushed back to a borderline RB1 and more of a flex play for me. Unless Seattle specifically comes out over the next 2 days and says they're going with the hot hand or a 50-50 split in this situation. However, I will give it 1 more week until we entirely flip our view. Are we buying into Keon Coleman's week 1 performance, or was it just a random blip in the matrix that will not repeat? We've never seen that level of production from Coleman. Year 2 leaps, they are real, right? However, 8 receptions on 11 targets for 112 yards and a touchdown for a player who averaged just over 2 receptions per game last year, that is more than a leap. That is being launched into space. Coleman was a controversial draft pick in the NFL draft, and when we look at someone like Rome Odunze's breakout performance in week 1, we just say, perfect, that's exactly what we thought was going to happen, because he was viewed as an elite prospect, similar to being on par with Malik Neighbors. Keon Coleman, on the other hand, was more ambiguous. He had the underwhelming 40 time, and there was concern that his game wouldn't translate well to the NFL. There's also the factor of the volume in this week 1 game. It wasn't just exclusive to Coleman, and it was a massive outlier for the Bills. Khalil Shakir and Josh Palmer both had 9 targets. Josh Allen threw 46 passes, more than any game in 2024. We should not expect that same level of production from Keon Coleman this week. Points did fly in the Jets-Pittsburgh matchup, but the Jets secondary is strong, making Coleman more of a flex play here. Daniel Jones was in my waiver wire video as an ad, but I did have one caveat. You were adding him for future starts after this week in particular. Jones got it done on the ground and through the air with a beautiful 22 completions on 29 attempts for 272 yards. A passing touchdown, no interceptions, 7 rushes for 26 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. But this week's matchup is against Denver, absolutely a juggernaut on defense. Quarterbacks aren't a complete no-go against Denver. Yes, they did destroy Cam Ward last week, but he's a rookie. That was kind of expected. Quarterbacks can still find moderate success against Denver because there are other methods to attacking them other than just throwing at Patrick Surtain. I would expect a heavy targeting to Tyler Warren this week as the best way to attack this Denver defense through the air and for Jones to continue to have upside on the ground. Still, he's streaming option, but he is a high risk start this week. I would rather err on the side of caution and stream a guy like Michael Penix in a good matchup where he'll have Drake London rather than risk it with Jones. Again, he is still stream worthy if you need to do it, but just be aware it is very high risk. When I started this video, I didn't intend for it to be mainly quarterbacks, but it just so happened, so here we go, because there are so many interesting borderline quarterbacks this week. Week 1 should have been an excellent matchup. The Panthers were definitely far friendlier against the run in 2024. Their strength was in the secondary, but still not that big of a strength. This should have been a layup matchup for Lawrence and his brand new Liam Cohen offense. Instead, we got this underwhelming performance, and this was highly concerning because this is a make or break year for Trevor Lawrence. And this was not how we wanted it to start. Now, again, there might have been some extenuating circumstances, right? There was a very long weather delay. That hiatus maybe threw everyone off their game in terms of the long wait there, even though there weren't really heavy downpours that they had to play through. Again, long delays can just throw things off. Both teams look terrible. Still, this should have been a far better performance, and Lawrence is a risk until he proves that he can actually, do well. It is tough, though, to pass up giving Lawrence a chance in week 2 because of this matchup with Cincinnati. Cincinnati's 2024 defense was dreadful, and it was dreadful in week 1. Make no mistake, the numbers on the surface don't show that, but context is key. Cincinnati had 2 interceptions from Joe Flacco that were the direct result of pure luck. The receivers bobbled the ball straight up in the air. Cincinnati intercepted the ball twice. Flacco actually completed 31 of 45 attempts for almost 300 yards and a touchdown. Just those 2 interceptions. If you take those away, this could have easily been a QB1 day for Flacco. Lawrence has the opportunity to put up the same level of volume in a matchup where both Jacksonville and Cincinnati need to show competence on offense. Again, it is very risky. Lawrence is a borderline QB1 this week. Again, play at risk. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel. You can find me all across social media platforms at It's Terra Time, so make sure that you are tuned in so you can get all the fantasy football advice that I'm bringing all season long. Every week I've got you covered. Waiver Wires, live shows with Q&A where you can ask any questions that you have, DFS content, and so much more.